Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So in today's class, I'll be reading a passage which is dated Sunday, June 23rd. So it comes in page number 45. So first I will read the passage, then I will explain its meaning. So Swami Vivekananda says, look at the ocean and not at the wave. See no difference between ant and angel. So this is the passage. I will be explaining these two sentences today. So for the sake of clarity, I will read it again. Look at the ocean and not at the wave. See no difference between ant and angel. So the meaning of the first sentence, that is, look at the ocean and not at the wave, is this. That is, look at the absolute and not the manifestation. So the absolute is the supreme Brahman and the manifestation is what we see in our everyday lives. That is a manifestation in different names and forms. That is manifestation in diverse names and forms. So here, the ocean, it refers to Sat Chit Ananda Brahman. And the wave refers to the manifestations in names and forms. So that is the meaning here. And regarding this, there is a particular passage from a lecture which is titled Immortality by Swami Vivekananda. In this particular lecture, he explains this. He says, stand as a rock. You are indestructible. You are the self, the God of the universe. Say, I am existence absolute, bliss absolute, knowledge absolute. I am He. Unlike a lion breaking its cage, break your chain and be free forever. So the idea about absolute, here there is a reference. Swami Vivekananda says it is existence absolute. So existence absolute means it refers to Brahman. And again bliss absolute, it again refers to Brahman. And finally knowledge absolute, again it refers to Brahman. And finally, Swami Vivekananda says that, say that I am He. So the identification of oneself must be always with this absolute and not with the manifestation, that is the body. So spiritual sadhakas or the aspirants of spiritual life must always strive to identify oneself with Supreme Brahman. So that is the emphasis here. Swami Vivekananda says, I am He. He, here it refers to the Supreme Brahman. So in our day-to-day lives, we usually identify ourselves with this body, with the sense organs, or the objects associated with our day-to-day lives, or even with our own self, this little self and ahankara. But here, Swamiji says that you are the self. Here self means it refers to Brahman. And he says you are the self, the God of the universe. So the meaning of this particular sentence, that is, look at the ocean and not at the wave, it refers to that always identifying oneself with Supreme Brahman and not with this individual self or this individual body. So the same theme We can find it in the Bhagavad Gita also. In the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2, we find Sri Krishna teaching Arjuna about the Supreme Brahman. So in the battlefield, Arjuna was confused, he was grief-stricken, he doesn't know what is right and what is wrong, he has forgotten his Swadharma and he refuses to fight. Immediately, Sri Krishna says, you are this indestructible soul, you are this indestructible Atman, so you rise up and fight. So here we can see that Sri Krishna did not preach any half-truths or any truths compromising spirituality. He taught only the supreme truth. He did not compromise saying, no, it is alright, and so on. He said the ultimate truth. He said, your knowledge or your perception is wrong. The right perception should be about the soul. The right perception should be based on the eternity of the soul, and the perception should not be based on this body. So in chapter 2 we find of the Bhagavad Gita, we find Sri Krishna, he pinpoints or he explains this truth immediately or without any compromise, I would say. He says, the soul is indestructible, the soul cannot be destroyed. And again, the soul is not subjected to birth and death. And the soul is immeasurable. So the qualities it goes on. Whereas Sri Krishna says, this body is destructible. And he says, this body is again subjected, it is subjected to birth and death. And this body is a limitation. So we find in chapter 2 of this Bhagavad Gita about this eternity of the soul. We find, for example, in shloka number 20, we find a wonderful verse. Sri Krishna says, Na jayate mriyate va kadachit nayam bhutva bhavita vanabhuyaha ajo nityas shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So the meaning of this shloka is this. Sri Krishna says, this self, that is a Supreme Brahman, is never born, nor does it die, nor after once having being does it go into non-being. This self is unborn, that is, the self doesn't come into existence. So the meaning is aja here. Aja means which is unborn. And the self is eternal. Eternal is, it is nitya. And again the self is changeless. It is shashvata. And the self is purana, that is ancient. It exists. And he says, it is never destroyed even when this body is destroyed. And there is again an interesting shloka which is number 23. Sri Krishna says, Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, na chainam kledayanti apo, na shoshayati marutaha. He says, the sword cannot pierce the soul, fire cannot burn it, water cannot wet it, and air cannot dry it. So again there is a related shloka following this particular shloka. Sri Krishna says, Achedyoyam adahyoyam akledyo shoshayevacha nitya sarvagatas tanur achaloyam sanatanaha. He says, the soul cannot be pierced, the soul cannot be burnt, the soul cannot be wet, nor it can be dried. It is eternal, all-pervading, it is unchangeable, and it is immovable and everlasting, and so on. So the idea that we get here is that the individual being, out of this ignorance and delusion, we think we are this body, but in reality, we are this Supreme Brahman. And that is what Swamiji here he refers as the ocean. Ocean here again if we go back to the sentence, we see Swami Vivekananda saying, look at the ocean and not at the wave. So here ocean means we have to always look our lives or from the standpoint of the eternity of the soul. So we should have a firm conviction or a firm conviction in this. It is not a simple belief. It is more than that. We should always have a firm faith in this ultimate truth. So Swamiji here is stating that ultimate truth. So we must have the firm faith or a belief in this particular truth. He says that an individual is not the body, but he is the Supreme Brahman. So the body, as we have seen, it is but limited, it is destructible, it is subjected to birth and death and so on. But in reality, we are the Supreme Brahman. So that is the emphasis here. So this is the complete truth, or the truth which is not compromised. And in this particular regard, our Indian sages are particularly bold. So they are not afraid to tell people the truth of about the reality, about the relation between the body and the self and so on. They have stated these truths boldly. So even in the Upanishads and we find there are plenty of truths related to it. So therein we can find very bold statements related to the man and his identity. For example, Swami Vivekananda says here, I am he. That is Aham Brahmasmi. So this is one of the 4 cardinal truths presented in the Upanishads. That is, I am Brahman. So an individual being is not this body as we think, but he is the Supreme Brahman. So next we'll go to the second sentence of this passage. So Swami Vivekananda says, see no difference between ant and angel. So repeat the sentence. See no difference between ant and angel. So ant is a very tiny creature and angel may refer to a devata here, living in heavens, for example. So Swami Vivekananda says, so behind this tiny creature and the highest creature remains the Brahman. So for example, behind the wave there lies the ocean. So the waves as an individual are different from each other. But behind the waves we find the ocean is the same. So in the manifestation, for example, in the manifestation only the names and forms are different. Whereas in reality, everything it belongs to the Supreme Brahman. If we see in totality, Brahman is the same. Only when we see its manifestation, there comes the difference. So here the emphasis is not to see the difference or to keep in mind that the identity is the same, or to feel or to remind oneself of this truth that behind this all manifestation remains the same Supreme Brahman. And regarding this particular statement, Swamiji, he has delivered, there is an interesting passage which is from the lecture The Vedanta, which was delivered at Lahore on 12th November 1897. And herein Swami Vivekananda says, from the lowest worm that crawls under our feet to the noblest and greatest saints, all have this infinite power, infinite purity, and infinite everything. Only the difference is in the degree of manifestation. So he says, from the lowest creature unto the greatest of the saints, he says, lies, there is behind them infinite power. And there is behind them infinite purity, and there is infinite of everything. Only the difference is in the degree of manifestation. So manifestation means the ability of a particular creature to manifest all these properties. That is infinite power, infinite purity, and infinite of everything. It differs. For example, animals, they are calibrated, or they are, can say, their genes are programmed in such a way for survival. So we can't say that these animals or us, they become capable of evolution into higher and higher beings. They become capable of manifesting more and more of sattva guna. See, animals are based on, most of them are based on, or all of them are based on tamoguna and rajoguna. So tamoguna and rajoguna, or most of them, are based for the survival of the individual being, and so on. But whereas the highest saints, they base their life on sattva guna. So sattva guna means life which is built on purity, a life which is built on unselfishness, and so on. So we can see the difference between here an animal and a saint. So as the animal evolves gradually, it is able to manifest more and more of this sattva guna. So only because of rajas and tamo guna, we are not able to manifest, or a particular being is not able to manifest, or it is not able to express its full identity with the Supreme Brahman. But still, Swamiji says that behind, even though whether they manifest or do not manifest, but behind everything there lies the infinite Brahman. So Brahman is behind, or the infinite power is lodged inside, but the particular being, or for example the animal, is not capable of manifesting that infinite power because of its constraints, or because of the constraints placed by the gunas. But whereas a saint, for example, is capable of manifesting the infinite power which is lodged inside him. So that is the difference. And again, in another lecture, Swami Vivekananda says, here he compares Bhagavan Buddha with an amoeba. He says, if the Buddha is the evolved amoeba, the amoeba was the involved Buddha also. So the point here is that amoeba is a very tiniest of the creature. So Swamiji says that in the course of evolution, we find the attainment in the highest being in the form of a Buddha, for example. He says that all those things in the process of evolution, all those energies was involved in the amoeba, and finally it evolved into a Buddha. So the point here is that we are capable of evolution, or we are capable of evolving spiritually. So whatever conditions we are in, we are capable of spiritual evolution. So we are capable of manifesting this sattva guna, and we are capable of manifesting this more and more of this purity, which is of the nature of the Supreme Brahman. And we are more and more capable of manifesting this power, which is again the nature of the Supreme Brahman. So we, whatever conditions we are in, here the reference is that we are capable of evolving and manifesting this infinite power which is within us. So that is the point here. So while in the course of evolution, so we normally find the difference in beings. So the point here is that we should try to sympathize with people who are trying to evolve spiritually. We have to try to sympathize with all beings who are struggling spiritually. And the point here is, despite all the differences that exist between man to man, despite all the differences that exist between man and animals, despite all the differences that exist between man and the angel, behind all these differences lies the Supreme Brahman. Only the lower beings are incapable of manifesting at present, but in the course of evolution, they are capable of manifesting. And the glory of this human life is that we are capable of doing this. And this is not just a belief or a theory. This has been experimented for thousands and thousands of years in India. From the rishis to the great saints of India, they have manifested this infinite power. If we look at the Puranas, if we look at the Vedas, we find plenty of characters, we find plenty of saints, or the plenty of the great ones who have manifested this power, who have manifested this infinite purity or the unselfishness, the great qualities that comes with it. So the point here is that we are capable of evolving ourselves into higher and higher beings. So that is the point here. So Swami Vivekananda here, he always gives the truth without any compromise. For example, if we read the complete works, Swamiji's complete works, we find Swamiji giving the truths about Vedanta boldly and clearly. He doesn't state any half-truths or compromised truths and so on. So the point here is that our identities and roots must shift towards higher identities. So at present, our identities are associated with this body and this bodily connections. So the point here is that we have to shift this base of this identity to higher identities, that is Brahman. So that is the way to resolve most of the problems in our daily life. So problems can be temporarily solved using material solutions, but a permanent solution only can be obtained only through spiritual understanding or the spiritual realization of truth. So the only way to come out of the problems or for any problem permanently is to identify oneself with the Supreme Brahman. So is to identify oneself with the complete oneself, which is without any two or which doesn't know any fear and so on, which you understand, you realize oneself as the Supreme Being. So that is the only truth which doesn't have any compromise, and that is the truth wherein we arrive a complete solution for life. But this solution requires, Swamiji in many places has said, this solution requires certain boldness. So in spirituality, Swamiji says we require this boldness. So we have to strongly assert our spiritual identity. So that is our right. So to assert this identity and to realize this identity is the birthright of every being, is the birthright of all beings, right from the amoeba, right from the animals, and so on and so on. And so therefore, we have to always feel, in spite of whatever the circumstances we are in, Swamiji says that we have to feel that we are strong. So infinite can be only be strong, it cannot be weak. And we have to always think of ourselves as free and not bound. So we are not bound souls, we are always free. So this identity must be strong. This spiritual identity must be thought about, it must be repeated in our day-to-day life, and it must be meditated upon. So the spiritual truths which you are listening about this higher self, it must be thought repeatedly in your daily life, and it must be meditated upon, and finally it has to be realized. So only this solution can satisfy a human being. No other half solutions can satisfy us. So whatever other identities you take up, it is not going to solve any problems in life. For example, nowadays in Western countries, they take up lot of different identities based on gender, based on human disorders, and plenty of identities X, Y, and Z. And as such, by taking such identity there, they address certain solutions which are in the community, but in the long run, it is not going to solve the spiritual problems in life. It is not going to bring a permanent solution in life. So the permanent solution can be arrived only when we identify ourselves with Supreme Brahman only. So no other solution is going to satisfy this individual soul or this individual self. So until then, the human beings, we have to evolve spiritually, and we have to manifest more and more of this Sattva Guna. And finally, Swami Vivekananda says that in one of the plays from the lectures to Columbo to Almora, he says that you have to become rishis for yourself. So the only way to understand that this is truth is that you have to become rishis for yourself. You have to experiment it for yourself, and you have to arrive at the truth for yourself. So only then we will get that firm conviction. So these truths, it has to be listened, it has to be cogitated upon, and it has to be meditated upon, and finally, you have to realize it. So this is the greatest treasure which we have got it in India, that is the spiritual treasure. So the spiritual treasure, it is open to every one of us, and it is our birthright to take up all these treasures and to have it for yourself and also share it with others. And this is the truth about these two sentences that we have seen so far. So I will repeat these two sentences again for sake of clarity again. So Swami Vivekananda says, look at the ocean and not at the wave. See no difference between ant and angel. So between ocean and wave, ocean is but absolute, wave is but manifestation, that is different names and forms. And he says, see no difference between ant and angel. So behind all this manifestation lies the infinite power. So it is a duty, or whether we take it as a duty or whether we strive consciously or unconsciously, we are all going towards this higher and higher truths as we progress in our lives. So as we progress, we find that as we arrive closer to the absolute truth, we find that we manifest more and more of this purity. We find manifesting more and more of this strength that comes out of spirituality. We find ourselves manifesting a lot of sattvic qualities and so on. And finally, we arrive at this truth, which is Supreme Brahman. So nothing short of this truth is going to satisfy the human soul. So if you have any doubts regarding this, we can discuss here, these two sentences. So we shall continue in the next Sunday also, this Inspire Talks. We will take up further passages from this book and we will go through the meaning of the sentences. Right? So we'll close with the Shanti Mantra. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.